It was a week that began with the president's speech on Afghanistan, followed by a raucous rally in Phoenix that helped widen a rift between Mr. Trump and top Republicans in Congress. That's the backdrop as we turn to the regular Friday analysis of Shields and Brooks. That's syndicated columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. Gentlemen, it's so good to see you both together. Welcome. So, Charlottesville, it's been almost 2 weeks since the tragedy there. It has risen in the headlines again this week, David. The president's in Phoenix. He makes this passionate speech, unscripted, defending the way he handled Charlottesville, bringing on even more criticism. Are we any clearer now on what this president believes about racism, about white supremacy, and all of it?
I think we're a little clearer on where the Republican Party is. You know, the Trump campaign began really seriously with the Muslim ban. It continued with a series of racial things about the wall. It continued with the Charlottesville and the reactions. And what's happened is the racial winking and content, white identity politics, has become a rising motif in the Trump administration, especially as everything else, including economic policy and economic populism, has fallen away. And that's meant the Republican Party, or at least some portion of it, and I don't know how big, has become more of a white ethnic party, an ethnic nationalist party. And that has made life impossible for a lot of people who signed up as Republicans but didn't sign up for this. And we've had fights within Republicans on a lot of different issues, on taxes, on wars, and things like that. But this is a fight upon which parties break apart, because you can't be a Republican. If the Republican Party becomes a party aligned with bigotry in some overt way, or in any way, you can't be a Republican and try to be a decent person and be part of it. And I've watched within my friends here in Washington, friendships ending in a way I'd never really seen before. And friendship ending, I think in the evangelical world, friendships are ending. And Senator Danforth had an op-ed today, and Gary Cohen's put in this position. And so what you're seeing is the hint of a rupture, the likes of which I really haven't seen before.
And I was going to ask you both, and David brought it up, Mark, this column and today an interview by, this is the former Republican senator from the state of Missouri, John Danforth, saying if the Republican Party doesn't disassociate itself from Donald Trump over his handling most recently of Charlottesville and the race question, but he lists other issues as well. He said the party's sunk.
Yeah, Jack Danforth comes with credentials as a senator, as the Senate sponsor and personal endorser of the only African-American ever nominated to the Supreme Court by any Republican president, Clarence Thomas, who had worked for him. So he is someone who has certainly street cred on this issue. Judy, it's quite, I think, obvious at this point that the president does not understand what the job is. I mean, the job of the president of the United States is to be the voice of compassion, is to provide equanimity of spirit, is to provide a magnanimity of view. In a scripted, teleprompted address, he can give a coherent speech, as he did on Afghanistan, a colorless, energyless, but nevertheless coherent speech, as he did to the veterans. But he only thrives. He's only alive. He's only authentic when he unleashes his invective, when he stirs up the basest instincts of his supporters, and he responds only to cheers and jeers of those whom he opposes, whom he's still running against. Some 10 months after the election, he's still running against. So it's a sad, sad time. It has to be sadder for those who work in this administration to learn, as the Quinnipiac University poll, a respected poll, showed this week, that Americans by 2 to 1 believe that Donald Trump is dividing the country rather than uniting the country. That a solid majority, 3 to 2, they believe the press, the dreaded media over Donald Trump to tell the truth. And they believe that 3 out of 5 Americans believe he is giving aid and comfort to white supremacists and encouragement. So it's a truly sad. I can only say to Republicans, I mean, it is a time you're going to be asked about this. You're going to be asked where you stood. and what you did on Donald Trump. And I thought Gary Cohn, it only took him 2 weeks to come to it. And
this is the president's economic
yes, and then he came to the decision of conscience that Janet Yellen made a very candid statement today, a resignation statement once at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where she announced that she, in fact, that the regulations imposed on the big banks after the collapse of 2008, the financial crisis, were necessary, were wise, and should not be repealed. So Gary Cohn, holding on slimly, perhaps to the hope of becoming chair of the Federal Reserve, swallowed his misgivings and the odor of anti-Semitism that smacked Donald Trump's remarks, and agreed to continue as a patriotic man to serve. And I guess we can only salute him.
But it's a zigzag course, David. I mean, as both of you have said, when the president's reading from a teleprompter, the message is that we reject racism, we reject white supremacy, neo-Nazis. But it's in these speeches where there's another message that seems to come out. I was just reading the radio address that the White House is going to put out tomorrow from the president. He's back to the scripted lines, rejecting everything that smacks of
to
racism.
his credit, he's incapable of insincerity and hypocrisy. He can keep up for an hour, for a day, for 24 hours. He'll say what they tell him to say, but and then within 24 hours, he's got to come back to be himself, and he's got to explode beyond those barriers. And we've seen that again and again and again. And I just think the Trump administration is going to wander into these fields more and more in the months and years ahead, simply because they don't have an economic agenda. I put very small chance at tax reform. They don't have populist things they can bring to people. And so what they have is this ethnic nationalism. And they're frankly going to be helped sometimes by Democrats or by radicals on the left who are going to deface a Thomas Jefferson statue or do something like that. And then that's catnip for Donald Trump. He can say they're defacing Thomas Jefferson. And so then the identity politics of the left and the identity politics play off each other. And you get this war of people who think that white and black are the only two categories in life, and that we should have some sort of political war over this, and it begins to look like the Sunnis and the Shiites. And as I say, that's a Republican Party that decent people don't want to be a part of, frankly.
And Mark, the president, meantime, is firing off tweets against fellow Republicans. I mean, today it was Senator Bob Corker. It's been the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, House Speaker Paul Ryan. You go down the list, 5 or 6 or 7 different Republicans he's going after. What's the strategy, the rationale?
I'm glad to be able to explain it. It was deemed, prior to this week, it was deemed impossible to make Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell into a sympathetic public figure. And Donald Trump has achieved that. It makes no sense. Politics is a matter of addition, not subtraction. I'm sorry, Mr. President, you cannot distance yourself from your own administration. I mean, they're saying, oh, he's going to blame the Republican Congress for the stalled programs, the non-programs, as David's pointed out, and the non-achievements is their fault. You know, it just won't wash. I mean, no president has ever attempted to do that before, to say, I wasn't involved in my own administration. It's these guys in my own party up on the Hill who've done it to me. So it makes absolutely no sense politically. There was one explanation offered by some people in the White House in the Washington Post today that he sees a looming disaster, and so he's going to distance himself. You cannot distance yourself as a president from your own administration.
Well, but again, I'm referring to this Washington Post story, David. The theory is that the president's going to be able to point the finger at those Republicans who messed this up, didn't get the job done.
Yeah, I don't think theory or strategy would be the words. I think it makes him feel good to get in a shouting match with Mitch McConnell over the investigation of Russia. There's no strategy here. The biggest, aside from the legislative agenda, the biggest event looming in Washington these days is the Mueller investigation. And if there's some sort of bringing of impeachment, well, the U.S. Senate, who he is working really hard to offend, they're the jury at the end of the day. And so it's just craziness to offend those people. But yet he's doing it, I think, out of short term. It's a matter of not strategy, but psychology.
But meantime, his administration is is moving in a conservative direction. Lisa Desjardins had a report, Mark, this week on the many steps that Jeff Sessions is taking in the Justice Department to roll back what we saw during the Obama administration. Just tonight, the president has now finally signed an order telling the Pentagon not to admit any individuals who are transgender, not to pay for the surgery that some of them choose to have. So there are steps being taken to carry out the conservative agenda.
Conservative agenda, Judy, among issues I haven't heard pollsters report were volunteered by those interviewed were statues being removed, which the president adroitly moved after, or transgender service members. I mean, the Navy SEAL who served 20 years did 13 overseas deployments, 7 combat deployments, and earned 1 Bronze Star and 1 Purple Heart, and is transgender, is now a woman, had more deployments and more days in uniform than Donald Trump or Mike Pence, or Secretary Huddleston, or Secretary Mnuchin, or Secretary Price, or Secretary Carson. Go right through it. I mean, he proved his patriotism. She proved her patriotism. That they're 100% American. I don't understand this. I commend Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Joe Dunford for, as soon as it came out, saying that when it came out originally and flirted with it in his tweet, that those who serve honorably in this service will be respected and continue to be so.
Just 20 seconds.
As I understand that, the important thing here was when he made the order, the generals decided that's just Trump being Trump. Let's just ignore it. Mm-hmm. And so that was the right thing to do. What's disturbing here is he actually followed through on his own statement. And so a lot of people in the administration are just saying, let's just let it pass, let it pass, let it pass on a lot of ranges. If he's going to now start following through and actually behaving, that puts them all in a much tougher position.
And this is after saying in the campaign he was going to be supportive of those who are LGBTQ. David, Mark, we thank you both.
Thank you.